Hi, welcome so much. This is Karen Sims again with the See You Try show, and I have a wonderful guest with me that I will let introduce themselves in just a second. With all the things that have been happening, I want to tell you a little bit about why we decided to sort of highlight and feature two local voices, Adrian Alexander and Justin Hendrix. I want to say a little bit about like how I decided to reach out to them. So Adrian inspired me. I saw a Facebook post about looking at intersectionality, and he really said a really powerful testament about whose voices weren't being acknowledged in the context of the larger Black Lives Matter conversation. And it really hit my heart and provoked lots of thought and had me do some research. And I thought, I want to elevate his voice and to have a broader conversation. And at the same time, Justin Hendrix reached out to me and said, hey, I'm working with the group Pain for Peace around the big march. And as he and I began to dialogue on Facebook, I was like, I want to elevate his voice too, and thought about how powerful it would be to have Adrian and Justin really share a little bit of the conversations that we've had privately, kind of offline, as a part of the Try show. With one caveat, and I realize I've never said this before, and it's not because of Adrian or Justin, but I need to say, the views and opinions of Justin and Adrian are their own. They are powerful activists and artists, and I want them to have space and place to voice whatever feels like authentic and natural for them. So let's get going. I've done the commercial. So please introduce yourselves.
Justin, you want to go first?
Okay. My name is Justin Hendrix. I'm a state advocate and an educator in the Champaign-Urbana area. I began in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm from Champaign-Urbana, but started my advocacy in St. Louis, Missouri, and then returned to Champaign, Illinois.
Okay.
Cool. My name is Adrian Alexander. A lot of people know me as Adrian Rochelle, but I have since become Adrian Alexander. I am born and raised from Champaign, Illinois. I went to college in Southern Illinois University, where I majored in musical theater. And from then, I kind of started my journey with using my art form with dance and theater to kind of bridge the gap between that and activism, and seeing how I could use my art to get involved with social justice with Black Lives Matter movement and LGBTQ issues, and just all things of that nature, just lifting up people of the other through my art form. And so that's kind of
wonderful. Yeah. So I thought maybe where we would start is in some ways where we started. We did sort of a little dry run yesterday, and we decided that we would talk a little bit about identities and introductions. And I thought maybe that would be the best place to start in terms of this conversation, because representation was sort of what sparked my interest in having this conversation. So please feel free to start the conversation around identities.
Well, I identify as he, him, his. So that's my personal pronouns, unless I'm in like a closed circle, and then we use like extra other words, to identify with each other out of love and embrace. So that's how I identify.
So I identify as pansexual, which for what you may not know, pansexual is the identity where you kind of care more about the person instead of their gender or how they identify. So you're more in love with like their inner selves and like who they are instead of what they physically present themselves as. As for gender, I identify with the pronouns of he, him, they, them. So I'm not quite on the line of non-binary. I think the proper or most overarching term is gender fluid. I think I have a lot of masculine and feminine energies about myself, and I love to genuinely carry them both with my day-to-day, how I live my life. So that's how I identify.
My daughter says it's the hearts, not the parts. And so that was the most helpful,
exactly.
The helpful way in terms of construction that it was for me as a mom. I think I share it with you. I do a lot of work around cultural competency and anti-oppression work. And it was around these conversations around pronouns and identity and the fluidity of relationships and love that really was a stretch for me in terms of my own growing edge, because I grew up, I'm dating myself, where we were like, oh, there's LBGTQ, right? And then there was the 2SI, and I was like, oh, I need to really, really expand my capacity and my understanding of love and relationship and again, representation and how people show up rather than boxing people up. And so it's been a constant growing edge for me that I think other people in sort of my age group are still struggling with. And so let's have that conversation around representation, because I know that those are two issues that both of you really wanted to elevate. Like whose voices, we've been talking a lot about Black Lives Matter, but you both have been aware of some invisible voices in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as specifically as it gets to the Black Lives Matter movement, I know one of the first ones that I noticed that were skipped over was Tony McDade, who was killed by police in Florida, I believe. And I, like, all of the protests that I've attended have yet to mention him. And like none of like, and like with my tons and tons of say this name, he is not being said. And then it's just, so like that's specifically with the Black Lives Matter movement. And then we like, and then even to get about like, we can't even like, highlight Black women right now, really. And it's like the fight to like uproot, like talking about like Black women the same way we were talking about Black men who are getting killed. And then, stepping outside of the movement, but just stepping into like the Black community in general. So many trans women of color, trans Black women are being murdered right now, by their own people, especially. And so not only are we getting killed by our own people, but they are then getting neglected by their own people, of remembrance, of fighting for them, of standing up for them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So to further go along with what Adrian was saying, like, just let it be known, like in 2020, 19 trans women of color have already been killed. And that includes the recent addition of that's just trans people, with the recent addition of Nina Pop, Tony McDade, and also Dominique Fales, which we don't mention. Another thing is that we turn into a sense of a masculinity message, because we cast out women and trans people, and we only focus on the death of men, and Black men particularly, to where we wipe out even children, to where even in Champaign, Kewan Carrington is not mentioned and Toya Frazier is not mentioned. And that is something that is even locally, that doesn't happen because we're so stuck on national news. As far as the Black Lives Matter movement, I've lived in St. Louis and I've experienced Ferguson firsthand. And even in that experience, being a Black man and a Black queer man, you felt divisions even within those moments of having to want unity, but there wasn't any unity there, because some people didn't even accept you for who you were. So you heard slurs on the marching lines. You heard things that you thought that you wouldn't hear in those moments of having to be family, and being Black family at that. So we already are stuck within our own, I would say, systemic taboo, per se, when it comes to gender and sex, because of religiosity and looking at things from a heteronormative lens, to where we don't identify with intersection or with a spectrum as far as man and woman. So that's a bigger topic even before we even go into the Black Lives Matter movement and talking about just the inclusion of all. We have to identify first within the household what's going on. We don't have the conversations with our children. Even the parents of the children didn't have those conversations with their children. So it's just a repeating thing of generations not having those conversations, of sweeping things under the rug that don't need to be taboo, because they've been here all these years and generations ago before we even arrived.
So I see, Adrian, you're nodding, and I'm going to ask you both. So this is going to be because I had a friend recently remind me, we use a lot of code, like those of us who were in like social change movements, we're like heteronormative and intersectionality, and we use a lot of like code language. And she was like, can you break things down? Because if you're not like in the club, like, right, like, and so if I can have you go back and just sort of like imagine I'm 10 and Justin and Adrian, you guys can tag team if you want, really try to break down what you just said, like, in like, again, if I'm 10 years old and you really want your audience to understand what it looks like, what it feels like, the kinds of experiences, can you make it as, or make it plain, right? Like, if you can explain.
So I'll take intersectionality.
Okay.
So the easiest way I have always been able to break down intersectionality is that our society as a whole functions a lot on labels. And so if you think about these different categories of labels where it's like, so race, we have race, and then we have gender, and then we have like religion, and then we have sexuality, and we have like these different categories of labels that we break down so that we can understand each other. Intersectionality is where those races, or those labels intersect. So like for me, I am a Black, pansexual, gender fluid person. And so that overarches 3 categories of labels we have in society. Just like Karen, you would be identified as a straight, cisgendered Black woman, and that's like 4 categories of that. And so that intersectionality is just like where those labels come together and how that may strengthen or lessen or put you on this oppression, like, and I hate the word the oppression Olympics, but like where it puts you at a disadvantage of society if you're if sometimes your intersectionality will do that.
Yeah. Thank you. Justin, do you have anything else to add? Okay.
I believe like Adrian pretty much like tackled it for the most part, as far as like intersections and how we have different layers and how we identify, just in the sense of being inclusive and having that authenticity as far as how we identify in those different areas and boxes that we check off.
So what's heteronormative? Right? Like, because I think it's really important in this moment where we're talking about essentially Black heteronormative lives matter, right? Like not even Black male lives matter, because it's only a certain kind of male version of maleness that is recognized.
So basically, like,
let's talk about that.
Like with heteronormative, when I say that, it means because how we see things, everything is seen from male and female, everything is seen from an aspect of man and wife. From how we learn about things like sex education, is from a reproductive sense of having a baby. From when we see things in the media, it's portrayed from a sense of straight things only, per se, to break it down for people in a basic sense of words. So from a straight view of things, seeing things only man and woman, female, male, and that is only it. So that's basically what I mean by heteronormative, is like anything outside of that is not the lens. So basically, like, really it's the American dream as well, because that also identifies with having the white picket fence, the wife, the children, going to school, being successful, which we know socioeconomics and disenfranchisements with discrimination doesn't actually help out with education and eliminating discrimination. So that's a whole nother situation with that. Right. So just with the whole sense of seeing things from only male and female perspective, it already puts on blinders from seeing things that can bring in intersex, non-gender conforming, non-binary, and the transgender people as well within identifying with anything of a relationship or having things of interest or intimacy. So that's the best way to put it.
I love it. Okay. So why is it important? Why? Because it's important to both of your works. Why is it important in this moment where we're really looking at transforming issues of equity? We're looking at issues of anti-oppression, right? We're trying to do that. We're also trying to make sure that all lives of people of color, particularly African American or traditionally marginalized people, get recognized and are valued. Why do you both think that it's important? Yeah, like, of course, right, like it's a duh, but what would you say about why you think it's important to elevate these conversations or to be talking about this?
Well, I think we had the conversation forever. It goes back to Birth of a Nation. It goes back to even before that, the civil rights, even before that, Reconstruction, when we just had the conversations of just screaming out equality, and even more so, we're at equity now. We need equity, and people are so stuck on equality that we've been having those talks for so long that we forgot about equity, and that's what we really needed in the beginning. To then have the equity, to then make it equal among us all. And so it goes like Birth of a Nation, Reconstruction, Civil Rights Movement, and how we've been having these conversations just in the sense of moving in motion. And then we have our different leaders from Martin Luther King and Angela Davis, and people that spoke out against those things, like Malcolm X, who wanted those things done. When they say the bullet or the ballot, they want those things done for us because we have been having those talks, but now people are having them more now than ever, because we're at a peak to where we're tired, and we're past being tired. And like our ancestors are waking us up and saying, it's time, and the time is now. And so we're tired of hearing things of being called like super predator. We're tired of the years of the crime bill. We're tired of Reaganomics. We're tired of even the Bush campaign ads when he used for Andy Dukakis, when he used Willie Horton. We're tired of those things. We're tired of seeing Mike Brown and Breonna Taylor and Elijah McClain, who doesn't get any press coverage. And he was basically murdered and totally disregard of his mental health awareness. So those conversations we must have, because it's a bigger thing than just murdering Black and brown bodies. It's a thing of needing social services. We need mental health awareness. We need those things in our community, because we are dying at bigger rates than besides just brutality from police. We're dying in more ways than one, and we don't realize it. But now we're waking up and seeing that we're leaving here in large rates, and we have to figure it out, and we have to figure it out now. And we can't wait any longer. So the conversations that we're having, they're deep, and they're harsh, and they're tough, but it's out of love for our people, and we must get things done, and we must get them done now.
Absolutely.
Adrian, you're like, yes, okay.
I'm like, yeah. The way I like to think about it all is that it just goes back from this, like, we're constantly in this battle with ourselves because of this like human nature that we always fall victim to, of just hating change. And it's like, as tale as old as time, always have hated it, and it just continues to show. And so what our society, as it evolves and as it gets smarter, we put these like broad changes out, but nothing ever actually changes. And so it gets more and more subtle until it digs back up in someone inspires for it to not have to be subtle anymore. And then things that were like made subtle, and that we kind of like, as Black people and as queer people and as queer Black people, got used to hearing and got used to like kind of tolerating, got more blatant. And I think that's just the thing that we need to like start. It's about fight as human nature, that like, yes, we hate change, and that's why things haven't really gotten better, because we're like repeating ourselves in like less than 60 years of the same civil rights movement. And yes, like we have gotten like, obviously integration has happened, and obviously like work has been done, but at the same time there's been subtle things kept in place so that segregation still happens. And now it's like those moments of like gentrification where Black people get pushed tighter and tighter and tighter into less of a corner, and then you have gay Black people who get pushed tighter and tighter and tighter in the corner, and they have like less spaces for them than even like straight heterosexual Black people do. And it's just about like going now and like fighting to the root of the system and getting rid of all these subtleties and like actually having blatant equality or equity, as Justin said, because I think that is the thing of like, okay, it's equal, like you're here, right? But like, it's like, are we right. Actually in there? Are you like kind of like having like letting us into space, but having like that glass wall in front of us so that we can see in, and like, you're like, okay, I can see you, so you're here with me, it's fine, even though we're not like actually at this table with you or at this space with you, and you're making sure we're always going to be separated.
It's kind of like the neighbor from Home Improvement that just peeks over the
100%. But
he's just close enough to the party. Just close enough
to the party where he can at least like comment on it, you know, maybe like maybe they'll like throw something at him for a second, but like no, he's still right here and he will stay right
there.
Well, I think it's interesting. I want to get to, I'm not going to ask you this question now because I want to save it, but I'm going to ask you about what justice would look like, right? So equity, equality, and justice, right? Justice is transformative. But I do want to go back to something you both have sort of hinted at, and I don't think that we've had explicit conversation around. So you've hinted that there are some unique needs or some unique needs, challenges, oppressions that Black queer folks are experiencing in this moment that are not seen. And you talked about some structural needs, some mental health needs. And so if you wanted to sort of elevate those needs, knowing that there are lots of strengths and resiliency. So I want to make sure that, but when you're dealing with structural inequities and lots of other oppressions, sometimes those traumas impact you in different ways. So I want to give space to elevate, to sort of illuminate, what do you see as some of the unique needs, both structurally and mental health and traumas that people might be experiencing that you feel like maybe are invisible a lot of times?
Personally, living in St. Louis, and when I lived in St. Louis and I was learning more about the LGBTQ community and the community I was being a part of and embracing, I realized there was a dire need for mental health awareness. There was a need for education, for just the sense of, like I said, when I said earlier, in a heteronormative lens, how sex education is not educated for a person that is of same sex or of bisexuality. There is no education course for that, and we need to have those conversations. So that's just one thing as far as just the aspect of just sex health and wellness.
Can I ask a question, Justin? I want to just slow you down. So you said that there might need to be more conversations around mental health. Can you talk about some of the things that you see more broadly and deeply? And then I'm really super curious about why maybe you had to leave here. Are there anything like that or community specific that we should be talking about in terms of resources and supports?
I would say, as far as like resources for mental health, when I was growing up and coming out, I never say I came out, I always been myself, but it was just the fact that I didn't have resources. Like there wasn't a youth group. There wasn't older mentors that I had that I could identify with as far as my identity, as far as attraction. I had mentors, but they didn't have the same attractions that I had. So I couldn't go to those people when I had one of those deep conversations. So that's another thing that can hinder your mental health awareness and wanting to identify and learning about who you are and coming out and growing up. Also with coming out, most Black children in particular are kicked out because of religion and just kitchen talk table conversations, but we just don't do it in our house. And so that even goes forth to homelessness, which then can lead to drug addiction and also sex work, and which people shame. But I don't shame people that do sex work, because at the same time, you have to understand trans people are marginalized greatly in the employment field. And so they have to find their best resources possible. And at times they have to use those resources that they're looked at as fetishes to then hinder those areas where they are lacking at with housing and social resources. Even with needing hormone production for trans people when they're going through their transitions. Those things are very much needed, because along with them taking the hormones, they're needing probably therapy and counseling to help them through with personal needs as well, because that is a trying time with identifying and transitioning yourself into the woman or the man you're choosing to be or born to be. So we have to have those talks and those resources to help our young Black and brown, queer and trans youth at large. Because if we don't have those conversations now, when they get older, they're going to be lost, and that continues to then increase the things of HIV and AIDS and other health concerns, and even continue the death rate of trans people at large, and even women. So we have to think about needing those resources, because that stops those other triggers that have been set in place, and take them out, because we're getting the resources and help that we're needing for so long that we haven't been given.
Yeah.
100%. Because I want to just piggyback, because you talked about it, but dig into a little bit about like religion, and like the thing about like our country, it like being like one nation under God being our pledge. Not to like I love my religion, I love being a Christian, but it is quite systemic and a double standard of having one nation under God and our pledge, and then having separation of church and state. And like in like our system of law and ruling and things about that. And then to even move a step further, so we go past that, our nation as a whole is this one nation under God, and then we go to looking at our ancestry of slavery and how the only thing we had was our spirituals and our singing praises to God to get us through the day of being on the fields and working and being worked as slaves, and then moving a step forward to the civil rights movement that was led with all those spirituals and all those Negro anthems and all those things that were written in the Black national anthem. And it's just so founded and rooted in religion. And so the homophobia that is in religion, because I don't like, it's that I have a lot of bones to pick on that from even my own studies of the Bible and religious studies of that. But it has been so founded and rooted in homophobia where Black people can't even begin to think about having those conversations sometimes, because it is so ingrained in us. And then you get to the internalized homophobia that I know I found in myself. I'm not going to speak for Justin, but I know I found in myself just from being Black, because because religion is so ingrained in us from the time we start walking on this earth, where you can't even, you can, but it's a very uphill battle to begin peeling back those layers of do you actually have to feel like this or can you find your own opinions, which I then found my own opinions and facts. But yeah, I just wanted to tag before we got too far from religion.
So I wanted to just sort of add, there is this Gnostic text from part of the Bible that doesn't show up in the Bible, but it says, if you bring forth that which is within you, that is what is within you will save you. If you suppress it, it will kill you. And I think so often people who have to compartmentalize parts of their identity and selves suffer, right? Emotionally and heart-wise, because we need to sort of be loved and validated. It is the reason why people have come up with the phrase Black Lives Matter, is because when people aren't loved and seen and validated, it hurts the self, right? To the core of who you're, because it is very hard to reflect back positive, good stuff if you don't feel like the universe is reflecting positive and good stuff. And then you have to find your own communities, and you have to come up with some kind of sometimes false narratives and false selves. So I love that